There are lots of distinct styles of fried rice. In front of me are a Korean kimchi bakumbap. It's got pork belly and kind of an older fermented kimchi that's like really bright and vibrant. This is a Chinese American style fried rice, but it's made with brown rice, pork, and shrimp. And then last is a British kedgeree. It's lemony with little bits of smoked salmon in this case. I love them all, but what I love the most about fried rice is there's kind of a formula to it. There are core components, an order of operations, and a way to treat the rice that are all more or less universal. Once you nail that, you can riff in a zillion different ways to make fried rice with whatever you got. All right, let's talk about the rice. You can use pretty much any type. Now, if you're making a particular style of fried rice, it's nice to use a rice that's local to that region. The most important thing, though, is to use stale rice, like leftover rice that's been in the fridge overnight. When rice is stale, the grains are firm and dry because the starch molecules have crystallized and that sort of locks water away. You might have heard of another term for this staling process, retrogradation. So that firm, dry texture, it makes the grains really easy to separate. And that's exactly what you want for fried rice. In fact, the fridge is great because rice can stale about 6 times faster in the fridge than when you store it at room temperature. When I'm making a Chinese-style fried rice with freshly cooked rice, I like to spread the grains out on a rimmed baking sheet and then let them cool completely. After that, I'll pop it into the fridge for about 30 minutes. This method takes a little more time, but it creates lots of exposed surface area so that more moisture evaporates. One other option is to gently fluff your freshly cooked rice and then just transfer it to a bowl or a container. Let it cool for about 30 minutes. Sarah An and her mom, Nam Soon An, recommend that method for their kimchi fried rice. You can find that recipe in their cookbook, and there's a link in the description below if you want to pick it up. The other option is to use brown rice. Now, it's going to take a little longer to cook because that bran layer is intact, and that means that the grains absorb water and soften more slowly. But the perk is that you don't need to stale it. The bran layer corrals the starches, and so the grains just won't get as sticky. So that's your options for the rice itself. Let's move on to the mix-ins. I'm going to walk you through my recipe for a simple Chinese-style fried rice. It's a lot like the fried rice my grandmother made when I was a kid. So for the mix-ins, I always include scrambled eggs, but the other proteins and vegetables are up for grabs. Today I've got ham, eggs, peas, carrots, and scallions. So we're going to start with the carrot here, and I always make sure that I cut those pieces uniform and pretty small, and there's 2 reasons for that. I want my mix-ins to be in every bite, and so if they're really big, then you end up with like a giant hunk of carrot or a spear of broccoli or half a shiitake cap sticking out, and that's not what I'm looking for in fried rice. Keeping those pieces uniform, that's important too, because then they'll cook evenly. So I'm looking for maybe a 1/2 to 1/4 inch dice here, and there's nothing complicated to this. Just want to make a nice stable base, and then we'll start dicing. Okay. Next up, some scallions. I'm going to separate the whites and the greens because they're going to be used for different purposes. You'll see how in a second. And I just want to slice these thinly. Okay, so that's my knife work. Next up are the eggs. I like to prep the eggs with the other ingredients rather than beating them just before I use them. The reason for that is when you salt these guys early, the salt has time to denature the proteins, and that just means that proteins come in like little bundles and the salt unwinds them slightly. It makes the eggs a little bit looser, especially the thick bits of white, and it's easier to blend them all. So a little bit of salt. One thing you might notice if you beat your eggs in salt early is as they sit, they're going to kind of darken in color and become slightly translucent, totally normal. Before I start cooking though, I want to make sure that I have all of my ingredients and tools ready to go. Fried rice is a stir fry. It goes fast, and so you don't want to be running around trying to gather things as you're cooking. So I've got my eggs here. They're going to happen first. And then we've got carrots, ham, peas go in later. Last bit of equipment. I think it's important to have a landing zone when you're doing this sort of cooking. We can't cook all of the food in the same time in the wok. It's not big enough. Also, it's hard to season everything evenly. And so having a spot to land things as you're cooking sequentially is really helpful. So this is a 14-inch carbon steel wok, and I'd choose a wok over a skillet any day because its shape and capacity make it so much easier to toss everything together without having food kind of spill over the edges. If you don't have a wok, that's totally fine. You can use a 12-inch carbon steel skillet or a cast iron skillet. You just have to take a little extra care when you're stirring everything together. I want to preheat this wok, and what I'm looking for are wisps of smoke. That'll tell me that it's hot enough and I can start cooking. Because I'll be cooking things sequentially and seasoning them individually, there's a lot of amounts of salt and oil to keep track of. I like having the recipe out, and I'm using the ATK app to do that. It's just really convenient to be able to reference things as I'm going. 2 teaspoons. All right, here we go. So this part goes really fast. It takes less than a minute, and I just want to make sure those eggs are cooked through and they're not picking up much color, if any. That looks great. I like to do the eggs first because there's nothing in there for the eggs to really stick to. So next up, we're gonna add just enough oil to cook our carrots, about a teaspoon. A little bit of salt. I like to cook my mix-ins individually. It means that I'm not worried about things overcooking or undercooking. It also lets me season them individually. When you're working from a recipe that somebody has tested, they've kind of mapped out where you can kind of combine things and season things all at the same time. If you don't have those amounts and times in front of you for cooking, then going individually is just a much more foolproof way of doing this. I'm just looking for these carrots to become tender, and they'll start to pick up a tiny bit of color. That's a good sign that they're done. It takes maybe 2-3 minutes. If you don't like carrots, you don't have to use carrots. Really, any vegetables you've got kicking in the fridge would be great. Mushrooms, broccoli, onions, cauliflower, whatever you got. One of the things I always do with fried rice is I start with the ingredients that need to be fully cooked. After that, I roll into the ingredients that just need to be heated through. That can be something like this ham that's been cooked and just needs some heat, but also really tender, delicate vegetables that you don't want to overcook, like bell peppers or sugar snap peas. They're gonna go in at this point. This takes just a minute or two because the ham is cut into relatively small pieces. And I'm just gonna land all of this onto my plate. Of course, if you don't have ham or just don't like it, any other cooked protein would work. We're talking roast chicken, cooked bacon, Spam, Chinese sausage, whatever you got. Once the mix-ins are ready, it's time to fry the rice. Now, whatever kind of fried rice you're making, the rice needs to be well seasoned. And by well seasoned, I'm talking about more than salt. Your options are fats or oils or condiments or both. Fats and oils are great because they have flavor on their own, sesame oil or bacon fat, say, but they're also a great delivery mechanism for flavors that aren't in liquid form. We're talking aromatics like scallions or spices. The key is to make sure you have enough fat to coat the rice, and it's going to be a little bit more than you might think because there's a lot of surface area that oil has to cover. I want to lower the heat slightly and add my scallions. I'm not looking for browning here. I'm just looking to get that flavor pulled out of the scallions and infused into the oil. Scallion oil is really nice because it's not going to overwhelm the rice, and the fact that I'm using a jasmine rice for this fried rice, it's going to be noticeable. You could swap out other aromatics for the scallions, ginger, garlic, shallots, or even herbs and spices. If you were making, say, an Indian-style fried rice, you could use curry leaves, mustard seeds, cumin, garam masala, whatever you got. Just needs a little bit more time. I'm just looking for these scallions to be a little translucent. I'm seeing a tiny bit of browning. It's a good time to add the rice. And as I'm adding this rice, I want to kind of break it up, or certainly break up the clumps. When it's straight out of the fridge, it's cold, and cold things are going to be just harder than warm things. So something as simple as letting the rice come to room temp has a really nice payoff. It means you don't have to work as hard to break up the bits of rice when you're stir frying. This is about 4 cups of rice here, and that's going to give me a ratio of about 2 parts rice to 1 part other stuff. Fried rice for me is about the rice, and so I need there to be more rice than there is all the mix-ins. I want to give this a good stir, coat all of those grains with the scallion oil. This is looking pretty good. So at this point, I just want to spread the rice out into a nice even layer so that I can season it. This is one time where using a wok is really great. It means I have a really nice thin layer and I can get the salt dispersed without much work. So just like with the oil, you need a generous amount of salt. All carbs need a good amount of salt to taste their best. So don't be shy with the seasoning, especially if you're not using something assertively flavored like soy sauce or kimchi. A little bit of pepper. And now I just want to give this a good stir to make sure that I'm dispersing everything. These grains are looking nice and separate to me, but if I had clumps that I was having trouble breaking up, I would add maybe a tablespoon or 2 of water to those clumps. The water acts as a lubricant and it helps those grains slip past each other. This is just one of those tricks that Chinese chefs use. If you are adding water to break up the rice, you want to make sure you cook it off so that your fried rice doesn't end up wet and soggy. I like to keep my fried rice pretty straightforward. I season with just salt and pepper. If you want to use things like soy sauce or oyster sauce, kimchi juice, any of those liquid seasonings, I like to add those after I get the oil-based ones in. It just means that there's less time for the water to interact with the starches and make everything clumpy and gluey. So rice is heated through mostly. I just want to give this a quick taste to check for seasoning before we bring it all together. To finish, I'm going to get in some frozen peas. They don't need to be defrosted. They're going to see enough heat to warm them through. Other frozen things like frozen corn or like the mix of frozen corn, peas, and carrots are great for this. You can just add them in at the very end. My scallions, which really don't need to see much heat at all, they can go in now. And of course, all the cooked stuff. At this point, I just want to break up my egg with the spatula and give everything a good toss. This looks great. It smells great. Time to eat. I like my fried rice with a giant spoonful of chili crisp, but really garnishes are up to you. Fresh herbs, toasted sesame seeds, they're all great. Maybe sometimes even like a little squeeze of lemon or lime. The really nice thing about garnishes is that they're not mixed in evenly. You have control over that. You can have bites that are a little bit different from each other. It kind of makes the whole experience a little bit more dynamic when sometimes there's like a pop of spice or a little bit of acidity, and then the next bite is a little bit more muted and softer. This is like my ultimate comfort food. It's got this like kind of delicate sweetness from the peas and carrots. I've got tender bits of egg, salty pops of ham. Every bite has just this like lovely amount of jasmine-y, subtle popcorny rice. It's delicious. The other thing I really love and kind of expect in a fried rice is that I want every spoonful to have a nice distribution of stuff. I don't need every spoonful to have ham, egg, peas, and carrots, but I want to get a couple of them in every bite. And this really does it well. So this is one of my favorite combinations of mix-ins for fried rice, but I'd love to hear about yours. Let me know in the comments below. For the full recipe, you can download the ATK app, or you can find a link in the description below.